So a big thanks to Stephanie and Belinda and to all of you who are a part of this gathering. It is so great to see so many amazing women gathered in one place. And I have the privilege of leading CARE, which is literally about 3 blocks down the street. But what is the center, the headquarters of our work for 100 different countries. And we're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year. And the thing that we've learned over 75 years is that when you put women and girls in the center, then everything is possible. And we can defeat poverty, and we can together create a more just world. So that is CARE's mission, and that's CARE's work. And so I get to meet with, partner with amazing women around the world and amazing men. But I can look around this room and think that there is no, again, more powerful group than the one that's assembled right here in Atlanta. So I have to brag on us in Atlanta, Stephanie. I really am proud to be among such extraordinary change agents. And no matter what's happening out there in the world, we can take it on. I really believe that. So I have been tasked with talking a little bit about the Status of Women update. And so for those of you who don't know, it's put out each year by the World Economic Forum. And everybody knows World Economic Forum, you associate it with Davos. And every year they put out for the last number of years since 2006, a global gender gap report. And they do analysis, and they look at 153 countries. I want to tell you that in the next 8 minutes, I'm going to take you through 371 pages worth of information. So I hope you appreciate the abbreviation of the effort here. So 4 benchmarks that they're really focused on: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. So I'll walk you through this a little bit. So the big headline of this that many of you all have probably heard over the last week since this was put out: 99.5 years until global gender parity. And that's the average, right? It's worse than that in a number of places around the world. If some of you might have heard the Secretary General's speech last week, in which he talked about basically gender equality, and he said, how can I tell my granddaughters that their granddaughters will still be paid less than our grandsons? So we have a lot of work to do. That being said, for a little bit of optimism, think about this. I didn't even know how to put this, like thousands of years of the patriarchy here, right? And we are sort of making some progress. And so we do need to keep in mind that sometimes these changes do they both take collective effort and they do take concerted effort over time. So this gives you a little bit of the sense of something that maybe is not so intuitive, right? East Asia and the Pacific, 163 years. So the farthest away from gender parity. Actually, North America, by this report, is 151 years away. The global average is 99.5. But interesting, like Western Europe, that might not surprise us, but Latin America and the Caribbean. So we have a lot to learn from, and we have a lot of opportunity for partnership if you think about the global opportunity for women to come together. So percentage of gender gap closed to date. So this gives you a sense of, if you want to look at equality, we've made the most progress around educational attainment and health and survival. I do want to point out, because I'm reporting on the report, but I do feel compelled to say 130 million girls are out of school right now. So we still have some work to do. And I have to say, I just will tell you a little anecdote. So this morning, as I was looking at this, I was thinking, I'm going to Google to make sure I have the latest number on the girls that are out of school. And I Googled, and I only got so far as how many girls. And the next set of things were how many girls are still left on The Bachelor. How many girls are still left? So we have an opportunity to bring the world back to what really matters, which is, how many girls in the world do we need to be supporting in order to enable them to reach their full potential? So we still have work to do despite the high rating there. Health and survival, also, that means, in essence, they're using a couple of benchmarks that include things like longevity. But I do want to point out, at a time when sexual and reproductive health and rights are being challenged here in our own country and around the world, there are hundreds of millions of women that don't have access to basic contraception and don't truly have equal access to health care. So again, on the economic participation, we still have a long way to go, 58%, political empowerment even farther. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So let me do a little test. I think I just gave away for those of you who are fast readers. I'm going to go over the top 10 countries for gender equality and the bottom 10. Anybody want to guess where the U.S. sits? Bottom, no, not bottom 10. We're not that. You can be encouraged. It's not. We are 53rd. 53rd. So top 10, you can see, maybe, the Nordic countries are definitely doing something right. And then if you look at the bottom 10, I will say that one of the things we know is that when you have gender inequality, you also have conditions for conflict. Many of these places, it's compounding, right? It's an unvirtuous circle because you both have inequality, which can, I think, compound conflict. And when you don't have women that are representative in peace processes, for instance, they're much more elongated. So we do need to be thinking about, especially as women, how are we not only lifting up one another in our own workforces and our own communities, but how are we standing for the women in Yemen and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia? How are we standing in solidarity? This is a little portrait of countries who've had at least one woman head of state. So there's a pretty big gray area here, where it's actually kind of proximate to where we are. I think that speaks for itself. 47% with at least one woman who has been the head of state. Now, women's political participation, you saw that was the lowest, 25%, right? So we have globally, this is global, 25% of congressional legislative bodies are women, 21% of women ministers. If you just look at the United States, which I just added for perspective, we're actually lower in the United States than the global average in political representation. That's something that we all could do something about, right? How many people, anybody here ever think about running for office? All right, we need a few more hands to go up in order to do something about this slide. Percentage of women in companies, boards of directors. So, this is pretty interesting. Only 21% in the United States. One thing just to note, a lot of people don't, and I've been reluctant talking about quotas. Where there are quotas around this, there's progress. When it was elucidated in the report, again, this is the 8-minute version of the 353 pages. These were some of the 3 big opportunities to women around the world. 1, women have greater representation in roles that are being automated. 2, women are not entering professions where wage growth is the most pronounced. So if we go to the headquarters of a tech company, we may not see as many women programmers as we would like, as an example. And then women face the perennial problem of unpaid household and care work, which is something that I think women around the world can unite around. And we don't have as great of an access to financial capital, especially around the world. So I don't know how many of you have read Melinda Gates' book, but she does a really powerful job of talking about this, what she calls time poverty for women. So just as one example, women spend 7 more years of their life on average performing household work than men. So that's a lot of years, y'all. So I'm just going to close. That's the report, right? So I think there's a lot to work on there. There's a lot for us to rally around. There's a lot of things for us to think about. I'm just going to take a point of privilege and tell you about one woman who I think illustrates some of the issues, and one of the heroines for me, and a little bit about some of the ways that we can lift our sisters up around the world. Salamatu is from Côte d'Ivoire. She was 13 years old when she was married against her will to a man who was in his 60s. By the time she was 20 years old, she had 4 children. And she told me the story of they were so poor. She was beaten, she was physically abused, but they were so poor that she wore, when she washed her dress, she just wore it wet in order for it to dry. She had nothing else. Her husband banished her to Niger. And when she was in Niger, she met a group of women who were working with CARE, who had started something called Village Savings and Loan Programs. Small groups of women, imagine 20 of us here, 20 of us here, coming together and saving money and lending it out to one another to start small businesses. So Salamatu came back, convinced the CARE staff member in Côte d'Ivoire to start a Village Savings and Loan. She started with a $2 loan and started her own salt retail business. She ends up being an amazing entrepreneur. So much potential, human potential in the world that's being underutilized. She ends up sending her younger children to school. She was able to afford that. Buying her older children who hadn't been able to go to school a car so they could start a family taxi business. She divorces her husband and remarries someone that she loves. And on top of that, she personally brought the Village Savings and Loan Program to 3,000 women in Côte d'Ivoire. She personally started that program for 3,000 women. On top of that, she was the one who introduced it to Côte d'Ivoire, and there are 250,000 women in Côte d'Ivoire that now are a part of the VSLA program. So, issues of domestic violence, economic and financial inclusion, the political power. Half of the women that have been elected to political office in Niger have come through a CARE Village Savings and Loan Program. We need to find these platforms that engage people like this gathering, right, to consider running for office. So I think Salamatu is emblematic of the power that women have, not only to lift themselves up, but to change the lives of those around them and to change the lives of the communities and of nations. And so we have a lot to be optimistic about and a lot that we can do together. Just a couple of things to get involved. You all are already a super involved group. If you want to read the 350-page version, I would sort of recommend it. But more than that, I would recommend that you join with organizations, get involved in IWF's next set of programs, advocate. There's a huge amount that we can do together from a legislative perspective to advocate for change, not only for women here, but around the world. Volunteer, there's lots of opportunities. CARE started an Atlanta Women's Network focused on advocacy. We'd love to have you involved, and then contribute to the organizations that you care about, like IWF. We can do so much and have the mandate to do so. Thank you.